The September sun cast long shadows across Franklin Elementary School's playground as Mrs. Peterson watched her fourth-grade class file back inside after recess. Among them was Malik Thompson, a bright-eyed 9-year-old with a contagious smile that seemed to light up even the dreariest morning. Today, however, that smile carried an extra sparkle. It was Family Heritage Week, and each student was to share their family story. Inside the classroom, decorated with construction paper trees bearing student photos, Mrs. Peterson stood at the front, her perfectly pressed blazer and meticulously styled blonde hair presenting the image of educational authority she'd cultivated over 15 years of teaching. She prided herself on running a proper classroom, where everything had its place and everyone stayed in theirs. "Now class," she announced, tapping her pointer against the whiteboard. "Remember, we're sharing real stories about our families. No make-believe, no fairy tales. Just the truth about who we are and where we come from." The presentations began ordinarily enough. Sarah talked about her grandmother from Ireland. Tommy shared photos of his family's farm in Kansas. Then came Malik's turn. The young boy walked to the front, clutching a worn photograph. His confidence was unmistakable. Even as some classmates whispered and giggled, they'd heard Malik's stories before. "My name is Malik Thompson," he began, his voice steady and clear. "And this is my dad." He held up the photograph. It showed a younger Keanu Reeves, his arm around a beautiful black woman with Malik's same bright eyes. The classroom erupted in laughter. Mrs. Peterson's lips pressed into a thin line. "Malik," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "we talked about this. We're sharing real family stories." "But this is real," Malik insisted, his small shoulders squaring with determination. "My dad is Keanu Reeves. He met my mom when she was working on a movie set. He visits when he can, but he's very busy." Mrs. Peterson's face flushed red. "That's enough, young man. I won't have you disrupting my class with these fantasies. It's inappropriate." "But Mrs. Peterson—" "Sit down, Malik. We don't have time for made-up stories about celebrities being your father. It's disrespectful to your real family." The words hung in the air like poison. Malik's face fell, but he didn't argue further. He returned to his seat, the photograph clutched to his chest, while snickers echoed around him. What Mrs. Peterson didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined, was that everything would change in exactly 6 days. The story Malik hadn't been allowed to tell was both simple and extraordinary. His mother, Zara Thompson, had indeed worked as a production assistant on the set of The Matrix Reloaded in 2002. She was responsible for ensuring the comfort of the cast and crew, and it was during those long filming days that she caught the attention of a certain leading man. Keanu Reeves, known for his kindness and humility on set, had noticed Zara's dedication and warmth. They began talking during breaks, sharing stories about their lives, dreams, and philosophies. What started as friendship blossomed into something deeper, though both knew the challenges they would face. Their relationship was brief but meaningful. When Zara discovered she was pregnant, she and Keanu had an honest conversation about the future. He offered support, both emotional and financial, but they agreed that Zara would raise their child away from the spotlight. Keanu's career demanded constant travel and public scrutiny. Neither wanted their child to grow up in that fishbowl. True to his word, Keanu had been present in Malik's life, visiting when his schedule allowed, sending letters and making video calls. He set up a trust fund for Malik's education and future, but he'd also insisted on one thing, that Malik have as normal a childhood as possible, free from paparazzi and public speculation. Zara had honored this agreement, moving to the quiet suburb where Malik now attended Franklin Elementary. She worked as a graphic designer from home, creating a stable, loving environment for her son. She'd taught Malik about his heritage, both his African-American roots through her family and his mixed heritage through his father, emphasizing that he should be proud of who he was, regardless of what others might think. But children talk, and Malik, proud of his father like any young boy would be, had shared his truth at school. Most kids dismissed it as fantasy. Some teased him. But it was Mrs. Peterson's reaction that cut the deepest. The morning after the presentation, Mrs. Peterson called Zara Thompson. "Miss Thompson," she began, her voice professional but cold, "we need to discuss Malik's behavior in class." Zara, working on a design project at her home computer, felt her stomach tighten. What happened? Your son is telling elaborate lies about his father being Keanu Reeves. It's disruptive and, frankly, concerning. I think we need to address this fantasy before it becomes a bigger problem. Zara took a deep breath. She'd known this day would come. Mrs. Peterson, Malik isn't lying. There was a pause on the line. Excuse me? Keanu Reeves is Malik's father. We've kept it private for Malik's sake, but it's the truth. Mrs. Peterson's laugh was sharp and dismissive. Miss Thompson, I understand wanting to support your child's imagination, but this isn't imagination, Zara interrupted, her voice firm. I worked on The Matrix Reloaded. Keanu and I had a relationship. Malik is his son. Miss Thompson, Mrs. Peterson's voice hardened. I've been teaching for 15 years. I've heard every story imaginable from single mothers trying to make their children feel special, but encouraging these delusions. They're not delusions, Zara said quietly, and I'd appreciate it if you'd stop calling my son a liar. Well, Mrs. Peterson sniffed, perhaps we should have a parent-teacher conference to discuss this further. With documentation, of course. Fine, Zara replied. When would you like to meet? They scheduled the conference for the following Monday. Zara hung up, her hands shaking with anger and frustration. She looked at the framed photo on her desk, the same one Malik had taken to school. Keanu's arm around her, both of them smiling at the camera during a break in filming. Those had been happy days, before the reality of their different worlds had set in. She picked up her phone and did something she rarely did. She texted Keanu directly. We need to talk. It's about Malik. The response came within an hour. What's wrong? Is he okay? Zara explained the situation, her fingers flying over the phone's keyboard. She told him about the presentation, Mrs. Peterson's reaction, and the upcoming meeting. Keanu's reply was immediate. I'm in Vancouver, finishing a film. I can be there Monday. What time is the meeting? Zara hesitated. They'd agreed to keep his visits low-key, usually arranging them during school breaks or weekends. But this was different. This was about Malik's dignity. 3:30 p.m. Are you sure? My son is being called a liar. Yes, I'm sure. That weekend, Malik was quieter than usual. He spent hours in his room, the photo of his father now tucked away in a drawer. When Zara asked him about school, he just shrugged. Mom, he said finally during Sunday dinner, why doesn't Mrs. Peterson believe me? I told the truth, just like you always say I should. Zara reached across the table and took his hand. Sometimes, baby, people have trouble believing things that don't fit into their idea of how the world works. Mrs. Peterson thinks she knows everything about her students, and your truth doesn't match what she expects. Because I'm black? Malik asked, his voice small. The question hit Zara like a physical blow. Her son was only 9, but he was already learning the harsh realities of the world. That might be part of it, she admitted. Some people have trouble believing that families can look different from what they expect. But Dad loves us, right? Even if he can't be here all the time? Yes, baby, he loves you very much. What Zara didn't tell Malik was that his father would be at school the next day. Monday arrived with unusual heat for September. Mrs. Peterson prepared for the parent-teacher conference with her typical thoroughness, arranging student work samples and grade reports. She'd even printed out articles about child psychology and the dangers of enabling fantasy behavior. At 3:25 p.m., Zara Thompson arrived, dressed professionally in a navy blazer and slacks. Mrs. Peterson noted with satisfaction that she'd come alone, clearly unable to produce this supposed celebrity father. Miss Thompson, Mrs. Peterson began, gesturing to a chair. Thank you for coming. Shall we begin? Before Zara could respond, there was a knock at the classroom door. Mrs. Peterson frowned. She hadn't scheduled any other meetings. Come in, she called. The door opened, and time seemed to stop. Standing in the doorway, dressed in a simple black t-shirt and jeans, sunglasses pushed up onto his head, was unmistakably Keanu Reeves. Mrs. Peterson's mouth fell open. Several student art projects fluttered to the floor as her hands went slack. Sorry I'm late, Keanu said, his voice exactly as it sounded in the movies. Traffic from the airport was terrible. He walked in, pulled out the chair next to Zara, and sat down. I'm Malik's father. I understand there's been some confusion about that. Mrs. Peterson's face had gone from pale to bright red. She fumbled with her papers, scattering them across her desk. This isn't... Possible? Keanu offered gently, yet here I am. The next hour would become legendary in Franklin Elementary School history. Keanu Reeves, Hollywood star and action hero, sat in a fourth-grade classroom discussing his son's education with a teacher who had, just days before, publicly humiliated that same child for telling the truth. Mrs. Peterson, Keanu began, his voice calm but firm, I understand you have certain expectations about your students and their families, but I need you to understand something about my son. Mrs. Peterson nodded mutely, still struggling to form words. Malik is an honest boy. He's been raised to tell the truth, even when it's inconvenient or hard to believe. When he told you I was his father, he wasn't seeking attention or spinning tales. He was sharing his reality. I didn't, Mrs. Peterson stammered. You didn't believe him, Keanu finished. And worse, you made him feel ashamed for telling the truth. Do you understand how damaging that can be to a child? Tears began forming in Mrs. Peterson's eyes. The weight of her actions was crashing down on her. I've spent years trying to give Malik a normal childhood, Keanu continued. Zara has done an incredible job raising him to be kind, honest, and proud of who he is. But in one moment, you undermined all of that because his truth didn't fit your expectations. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Peterson whispered. I assumed. You assumed a black child couldn't have a white celebrity father, Zara interjected, her voice sharp. You assumed I was a single mother, making up stories to make my child feel special. Mrs. Peterson nodded miserably. Yes, I made terrible assumptions. I let my biases affect how I treated Malik. It was unprofessional and wrong. Keanu leaned forward. The question is, what happens now? What happened next would change Franklin Elementary School forever. Mrs. Peterson, to her credit, didn't just apologize, she took action. The next day, she stood before her class and admitted her mistake. Class, she began, her voice shaking slightly. Yesterday I learned an important lesson about assumptions and prejudice. I owe Malik and his family an apology. She turned to Malik, who sat wide-eyed at his desk. Malik, you told the truth, and I didn't believe you. Worse, I made you feel bad for being honest. That was wrong of me, and I'm truly sorry. The classroom was silent. This wasn't the Mrs. Peterson they knew, the one who never admitted mistakes, who ruled with absolute authority. I let my own biases affect how I treated you, she continued. I made assumptions based on what I thought I knew about the world, rather than listening to you. That's not what a good teacher does, and it's not what a good person does. Malik, showing maturity beyond his years, nodded. It's okay, Mrs. Peterson. Everyone makes mistakes. Thank you, Malik, but it's not okay unless I learn from it. She addressed the class again. I want you all to understand something. Families come in all shapes, sizes, and colors. They don't always look like what we expect, and that's what makes the world beautiful. Word of what had happened spread quickly through the school. Other teachers began examining their own biases. The principal implemented diversity training for all staff. And Malik? Malik became something of a hero to his classmates. Not because his father was famous, but because he'd stood firm in his truth when everyone doubted him. Keanu visited the school several more times that year, not as a celebrity, but as a father. He read to the class, helped with science projects, and attended the spring concert. He insisted on being treated like any other parent, waiting in the pickup line and signing permission slips. But perhaps the most significant change was in Mrs. Peterson herself. She began incorporating lessons about diversity, acceptance, and the danger of assumptions into her curriculum. She started a Truth and Kindness Club, where students learned about different cultures and family structures. One day, near the end of the school year, she pulled Malik aside. You taught me something very important, she told him. You taught me that truth isn't always what we expect it to be, and that everyone deserves to be believed until proven otherwise. Thank you for that lesson. Malik smiled, that same bright smile that had never dimmed, even in his darkest moments. My dad says the most important thing is to be excellent to each other. Mrs. Peterson laughed, recognizing the quote from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Your dad is a wise man. Yeah, Malik agreed. He is. The story of Malik Thompson and his famous father became a turning point for Franklin Elementary. It was written about in education journals as a case study in unconscious bias. Mrs. Peterson herself wrote an article titled "The Day I Learned to Listen," which was published in several teaching magazines. Years later, when Malik graduated from high school, three people stood beaming in the audience: his mother Zara, his father Keanu, and Mrs. Peterson, who had requested a ticket to see the young man whose truth had changed her life. In his valedictorian speech, Malik said, "I learned early on that truth isn't always convenient. It doesn't always fit into the boxes people have prepared. But truth has power. It can change minds, open hearts, and sometimes, if we're lucky, it can transform an entire community." He looked out at the audience, finding his fourth-grade teacher's eyes. "Thank you to everyone who eventually chose to believe in me, especially those who had to learn how." The applause that followed wasn't just for Malik's academic achievements. It was for a young boy who had held on to his truth when the world told him he was lying. It was for a mother who had raised her son to be proud of who he was. It was for a father who had shown up when it mattered most. And yes, it was for a teacher who had learned that sometimes the most important lessons come from our students. As Keanu often said in interviews when asked about his son, once the story became public, "The most extraordinary thing about Malik isn't that he's my son. It's that he had the courage to speak his truth when no one believed him. That's a kind of strength that can't be taught. It has to be earned." The story spread beyond Franklin Elementary, becoming a viral sensation on social media when a parent shared it with the hashtag #BelieveKids. But for those who lived it, Malik, Zara, Keanu, and Mrs. Peterson, it remained a deeply personal reminder of the power of truth, the importance of challenging our assumptions, and the incredible things that can happen when we open our minds to possibilities we never expected. Mrs. Peterson kept the framed photo on her desk for the rest of her teaching career. Not of Keanu Reeves, the movie star, but of Malik Thompson, the boy who taught her to listen. Next to it, she placed a small sign that read, "Every child's truth deserves to be heard." And in a world where truth often seems stranger than fiction, perhaps that's the most important lesson of all. The reverberations of that day continued long after Malik's graduation. Mrs. Peterson developed a new teaching methodology she called the listening curriculum, which focused on creating space for every student's story to be heard without judgment. She traveled to teaching conferences, sharing her experience and the lessons she'd learned about unconscious bias in education. Keanu Reeves, typically private about his personal life, chose to address the situation in a handful of interviews. "Being a father is the most important role I've ever played," he said in one rare television appearance. "Malik taught me that sometimes being present means stepping into the light when your child needs you, even if you'd prefer to stay in the shadows." The actor established a scholarship fund at Franklin Elementary for students who demonstrated courage in standing up for their truth. Each year, the Malik Thompson Truth Award was given to a student who showed exceptional integrity in the face of adversity. Zara Thompson, inspired by her son's experience, wrote a children's book titled My Truth, Your Truth, Our Truth, which became a bestseller. She toured schools across the country, speaking about the importance of believing children and checking our own biases. As for Malik, he pursued a degree in education with a minor in film studies, a perfect blend of his parents' worlds. He often said that his goal was to create spaces where every child felt seen and heard, regardless of how unexpected their story might be. During his college years, Malik interned at various educational nonprofits, always sharing his story as an example of why representation and belief in children's experiences matter. He became particularly passionate about helping mixed-race children navigate their identities in a world that often demanded they choose one heritage over another. "The day my teacher didn't believe me wasn't just about my famous father," Malik would explain in his presentations. "It was about the assumptions we make based on how people look, what we think their lives should be like, and our own limited understanding of possibility." Mrs. Peterson and Malik stayed in touch over the years. She attended his college graduation, where he introduced her as the teacher who taught me that people can change, and that sometimes our greatest mistakes can become our most powerful lessons. In a full-circle moment that seemed almost scripted, 20 years after that fateful parent-teacher conference, Malik Thompson returned to Franklin Elementary, not as a student, but as its principal. During his first address to the faculty, he shared his story once more. Every child who walks through these doors carries a truth that deserves to be heard, he told the assembled teachers. Some truths will surprise you, some will challenge your assumptions, some might even seem impossible, but it's not our job to decide which truths are valid. Our job is to listen, to believe, and to create an environment where every child feels safe sharing their reality. Above his office door, he hung a simple plaque, "Truth spoken here." Keanu, now silver-haired, but still carrying himself with the same quiet dignity, attended the ceremony where Malik was installed as principal. Afterward, he was approached by a young teacher who nervously asked for advice about connecting with her students. "Listen to them," Keanu said simply. Especially when, what they're saying seems impossible. You'd be surprised how often impossible turns out to be true. Mrs. Peterson, now retired but serving as an educational consultant, was also there. She and Keanu shared a moment of reflection, both understanding how a single day had altered the course of multiple lives. "You know," she said to him, "I sometimes wonder what would have happened if you hadn't shown up that day." Keanu smiled. "You would have found your way to the truth eventually. Good teachers always do. Sometimes we just need a push in the right direction." The legacy of that day extended far beyond the walls of Franklin Elementary. It became a case study in education textbooks, a viral story shared millions of times on social media, and most importantly, a reminder that truth often exists in spaces we haven't imagined. Educational researchers studied the Franklin effect, as it came to be known, the phenomenon where a single incident of challenging bias could create ripple effects throughout an entire institution. Schools across the country implemented truth and trust programs, designed to create environments where students felt safe sharing their authentic experiences. Malik's story was adapted into a feature film, with Keanu playing himself, an unknown child actor portraying young Malik. The film, titled Believing Truth, won several awards and donated all proceeds to educational initiatives focused on diversity and inclusion. In his 30s, Malik wrote a memoir, My Father, Myself, Growing Up Between Worlds. The book explored not just his unique family situation, but the broader experience of children who exist between different cultures, races, and expectations. "Every child has a story that deserves to be believed," he wrote in the introduction. "Mine just happened to involve a movie star, but the real stars of this story are the educators who learn to listen, the parents who teach their children to speak their truth, and the communities that grow stronger when they embrace the unexpected." The book's dedication read, "To Mrs. Peterson, who taught me that the most powerful words a teacher can say are, 'I was wrong, and I'm sorry.' And to my parents, who showed me that love doesn't always look like what the world expects." At book signings, Malik would often encounter educators who shared how his story had changed their approach to teaching. Parents would tell him about conversations they'd had with their children about truth and trust. And occasionally, he'd meet kids who, like him, had truths that others found hard to believe. "Keep speaking your truth," he would tell them. "The world needs your story, especially if it doesn't fit into the boxes people have prepared." One day, nearly 25 years after that pivotal parent-teacher conference, Malik received a letter. It was from a student at Franklin Elementary, a young girl whose family structure was, as she put it, complicated and hard to explain. "Dear Principal Thompson," the letter read, "my teacher told us your story about how nobody believed your dad was famous. Well, nobody believes my story either, but you being our principal makes me think maybe someday they will. Thank you for showing us that different families are okay." Malik framed that letter and hung it next to the photograph of his parents, the same one he'd brought to class all those years ago. Sometimes, when the challenges of running a school felt overwhelming, he'd look at both and remember that change often begins with a single voice speaking its truth. The story of Malik Thompson, Keanu Reeves, Zara Thompson, and Mrs. Peterson became more than just a tale about a celebrity parent. It became a testament to the power of truth, the importance of challenging our assumptions, and the profound impact that believing in a child can have. As Malik often said in his speeches, Every child's truth is a seed. When we choose to believe, we give that seed the chance to grow into something extraordinary. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, it grows into something that changes the world. In the end, that's exactly what happened. A fourth grader's simple truth, "My dad is Keanu Reeves," grew into a movement that transformed how educators approach diversity, authenticity, and the sacred responsibility of believing in their students. And in a small office at Franklin Elementary, surrounded by photos of students past and present, Principal Malik Thompson continued the work of making sure every child's truth was heard. Because he knew, better than anyone, that when we choose to believe, we open the door to possibilities beyond our wildest imagination. The story lives on, retold in classrooms and conferences, in books and films, but most importantly in the hearts of educators who understand that sometimes the most extraordinary truths come from the smallest voices. And that's a lesson worth believing in.